Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are joined by Steve Vincent, writer, teacher, author and spiritual coach with over 33 years of experience helping others overcome their challenges and live their Dharma. Steve is a public speaker, workshop facilitator and creator of Pendragon Men's Circle and Copywriters Escape Room support programs. He is a lover of sunsets, and his search for the truth of our human existence has stretched from the sands of the Sunshine Coast to the hot springs of New Zealand to the Peruvian Amazon for ayahuasca ceremonies, and has included many an energetic healing online and in person, and long hours alone pondering the meaning of life. Steve started out as a high school teacher and became faculty head and vice principal, and then moved into a freelance journalist, copywriter, writing coach and marketing consultant. His own journey has taken him inwards to unlock the pain of the human experience, which emerges in his words that are said to move women to tears and make men squirm. An experienced speaker, he has captivated audiences as large as 1,500 and coached groups of all ages and sizes. Steve is a father to 4 adult children and lives on the beautiful Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia. And when he's not writing and mentoring others, he can be found at one of the beautiful local beaches, communing with Mother Earth or gazing out to sea. Steve's published a book called Finding You, and one of the reviews about his book is amazing, and it says, if you've ever felt the pain of disconnect from yourself, from those closest to you, or from the world in general, then Steve Vincent's raw and authentic words are here to help. If you want to find true freedom, to find you, then you're invited to take the journey into your shadow self. So on that note, please welcome our guest today, Steve Vincent.
Hey, hello, thanks.
Thanks for being with us, Steve.
Pleasure.
So that's a little bit about you, but for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to where you are now?
Yeah, look, I am so boringly normal, if I can put it that way. I grew up in Brisbane, the suburbs of Brisbane. We were a normal, average, lower middle class family. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. We had a strong Catholic faith, and I was given a script to follow. And that script was work hard at school, get good grades, go to university, get a good job, and everything will be happy and everything will be great.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I did that really, really well, but I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
and things weren't really great, and I guess I never really felt I fitted in many ways. And one of the things I've worked hard on too is not to project out and blame my upbringing for how I'm feeling. I can acknowledge that that's what happened, and I followed it, but it just never really gelled with me. Don't get me wrong, I'm very good at teaching people, very good. So all of the things that I did that got me here have got me to this point, but it also was me in many ways not really being me. And I've spent decades, I think, unraveling that. Don't get me wrong, I have a very successful life. I have a beautiful wife, beautiful family. I live on the Sunshine Coast, which is very envious, for many people. So it's not like things are bad, but in here, things have been tough on occasions, and life is, and I guess if you're an empathetic person as well, life can be difficult. And so I've spent a long time unraveling that. And I think one of the things too, I have felt that all along, but I've ignored that. And I've put a mask in place pretending that everything is fine. And, you can squash that stuff, those feelings down for so long, but it comes back again and again and again. And at some point, you actually have to listen to that voice that comes from somewhere and take some action about that, right? Because life is a journey, but the little tap on the shoulder that you get, that little voice, that little gnawing away, it does not go away.
No.
And so you either suffer in silence, mask in place, pretending, oh, hi, how you going? Yeah, I'm really good. Or you do something about it.
Yeah, and sometimes wearing the mask and being happy on the outside, but inside, things aren't right. Sometimes that mask is it's easier than looking inside and doing the work so that you can live your full expressed self.
Yeah.
So how did you get to where you are now? Like what was some of the work you did?
I've done an awful lot of personal development stuff, from the big Tony Robbins rah-rah type seminars to individual coaching to journeying with psychedelics, ayahuasca in the Peruvian Amazon, which was a very big experience. I've had energy healings, journaling, breath work, cacao. It's almost like I'm this self-development junkie. I'm happy to own that. That's fair enough. But I guess it's like us humans, in my belief, us humans are like layers, right? And we do one thing to reach a certain level. We peel a layer off, and then we have to do something else because that layer is now different and you're now a different person. So peeling another layer off and another layer off. So to me, it's been a journey of, I guess, self-discovery. And the hardest thing for me, I think, has been honest with myself at every step of the way. Because, and you mentioned it, and I said at the start too, about it's just so damn easy just to go, mask in place, everything's fine.
Yeah.
And that works for only so long. And, you cannot be untrue to yourself, I guess I did it for years, for decades, but there will come a time when that gets to a point where you go, no, I've had enough of this. And, that's, I guess, one of the things I'm describing there is the shadow self. The Carl Jung, he said it best. He said, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it's embodied in the individual conscious life, the blacker and denser it becomes. He said, at all accounts, it forms an unconscious snag that thwarts our most well-meant intentions. Those are beautiful words.
Yeah.
An unconscious snag. So if there is something stopping you being happy, if there's some glass ceiling, there's a good chance that there's stuff shoved down in your shadow. So you have the person that you show the world, and then you have this other side of yourself that's got all the stuff you don't want to show the world, your shame, your embarrassment, your fears, where you feel small. And what he says is that if you ignore that stuff, that's just going to silently run your life, and you basically will never be happy. That's the key thing.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well, because you have that little voice in your head, and if you suppress it, and those feelings, those head, heart, gut feelings, you can logically know something, but then if your heart felt or your gut's telling you, and people ignore those signs of the heart and the gut, but they're there for a reason, and our body is telling us in different ways. And I love the fact that you talked about the little tap on the shoulder.
Go away, right?
In my coaching, I quite often use this analogy with my clients, is that, the universe will send you a message, and it'll give you a little feather, a little tickle, then a little tap, and it'll give you a slap, right? And then if you're really not listening, it'll send a truck. Right? To just mow you down. Now, that can be emotionally, can be physically, can be both. And sometimes when people push themselves too hard, and then they metaphorically and physically fall over, they don't understand why. But for me, I think that connection back to the shadow, trying to give you a message that it's okay to be you, it's okay to live your full self, it's okay to accept and embrace and acknowledge that we aren't perfect, and that's okay. And we do have those things that we might be fearful of or shameful of or guilty or whatever. But if we don't process those emotions, they're going to stay trapped, and they're going to stop us from living our full lives. So
100%.
Why, for you, because you've written a lot more on this than I have, why is shadow work important? What is the essence of doing the shadow work?
Yeah. So I'll go back one step. One of the problems or the difficulties, the challenges with shadow work is that who wants to admit that they're petty, they're nasty, they're weak, they have shames, they have embarrassments, they have guilt, they have fears. No one wants to admit that stuff, right? And so we don't look at it because it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
I don't want to admit that I'm less than. I don't want to admit when I walk into a room I feel this small or this big, whichever way I'm feeling at the time. And Dr. David Hawkins, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but in the book Letting Go, he said there's nothing unique about any of us. He said that when it comes to the way we symbolize our emotions, he said everybody secretly harbors the desire, or the fear rather, that they are dumb, ugly, unlovable, and a failure. Everyone has some version of that going on. I mean, I was so relieved when I read that, right? Because it was like, oh, thank God, it's not just me, right? And so the thing why that's so important is that, to get back to your question, why shadow work is so important, right? Is because if, think of us like this, if this is the bright, shiny, hey, look at me, I'm a good teacher, I'm a good speaker, blah, 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 blah. Over here is, I feel dumb, I feel small, I feel weak, I feel challenged, I feel embarrassed. If I'm not looking at that part of me, I'm only accepting part of myself. And I can never be happy and I can never feel whole because I'm not looking at both sides of me. It's only when I accept that I have all of those things, my pettiness, my shame, my guilt, my fears, it's only then that I can be like a whole person. Yeah. You can only ignore yourself for so much of the time, because ignoring that part of you doesn't make it go away. And I guess you can't find you can't find true freedom, because if you're ignoring your shadow, you're often always wearing a mask, and wearing a mask is not freedom, right? It is you pretending to be something that you're not.
Yeah, and it's like yin and yang. It's the laws of polarity, isn't it?
Totally.
We can't have, the sun without the moon. We can't have sunshine without the rain. Yeah. You need a little rain to make a rainbow. So having those shadow selves and having those fears, those little feelings of jealousy or pettiness or whatever, we all have them at some point in time. And if we suppress them, they probably grow more. Whereas if we let them flow through us, we've acknowledged that we've had that and now we've let it go. So now we can open space for other things to come in. But we are going to have ups and downs in life, because you can't stay up 100% of the time.
Yeah.
No matter what Tony Robbins looks like, he has to have downtime. Right?
Give me a high five for that, right?
That man is just, woof. Anyway, but he talks about his downtime and his meditations and what he does to reset, and that those events do drain him if you listen to some of the things he says. So there is, I think there's freedom in acknowledging that we are all of those things.
Yeah. And I think freedom in acknowledging them, but importantly, being okay with acknowledging them. Now I'll give you an example. If I hadn't have done all the work and understood the shadow and gone into all of that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you would have got a very different version of me on a call like this. It wouldn't have been as raw and authentic. It would have been much more polished, because I wanted you to see me as this wonderful speaker who was really, really intellectual and can really articulate things and really help people. I wouldn't have been able, because I felt so, or I was only looking at one side of myself, I wouldn't have been able to say that, you know what, Helen, I feel really small sometimes. I feel guilty when I've got success. I feel guilty when I've got failures. I could not have admitted stuff like that publicly. Like, who wants to admit that? Oh gosh, how embarrassing, but that's me, right? That authentically is me. And I say again, until we can authentically accept both sides of ourselves, it's like you say, look at nature. Nature has seasons. Nature has night and day, flood and famine. Why do we think we're any different?
Yeah, we're not. And I'm the same as you. I couldn't have done my podcast 10 years ago. I was a different person. And, that upbringing that we had, that, you go to school, you get a good job, you buy a house, you get married, you live happily ever after, right? Yeah, that's nice. And that has happened to some extent. But that inner fulfillment for me is just the journey that I've been on. And I'm still on that journey of self-discovery. So that leads in nicely to my next question. What are some of the best places to start a journey into, I call it self-love, self-compassion and self-acceptance. So what are your thoughts on that? And if someone was listening to this today and they're relating to what we're saying about wearing a mask and not being their authentic self, what tips can you give them where to start?
Yes, I think the first thing is just radical self-honesty. You know, in that moment, saying to yourself, yeah, I'm angry, or yeah, that cheesed me off, or God, I can't stand my sister-in-law. You know, she pushes my buttons, you know, or, oh, I can't say that about my family, whatever it might be. In the moment, that radical self-honesty and acceptance of that, not judging yourself. You know, that's the key thing, right? Oh, you know, you can't say that. Oh, gee, you're not a very nice person if you feel that. Well, you're just a human being if you feel that.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of the time, because we have those layers of masks and that mask in place, we don't acknowledge that. We don't acknowledge we don't like the sister-in-law, or we're going to the Sunday family roast dinner, whatever it might be, because you don't want to be seen as a non-dutiful son or daughter, or a bad family member. And so that okay with being imperfect, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah, so you've touched on something there about going to the family functions and the events. And I know that a lot of people go out of obligation or fear of rejection from one family member, whether that be a parent or someone, that if I don't go, what are they going to say? But you go and you're miserable.
Yes.
Right? So, you know, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I have, I'm youngest of 6, so I have lots of experience in this area. I'm a big family. And, you know, the dream was always one big happy family. You know, what a crock. I mean, you get some Christmas and there'd be 50 people there, right?
Yep, I'm one of 5. I can relate.
How can you have 50 individuals together and there not be issues, right? Human beings just aren't like that. And so here's the thing, and this gets back to honesty. You know, do I really want to go? Do I really want to host 50 people at Christmas? That's what I used to do. It was a horrible lot of work. I mean, I enjoyed parts of it, but it was a lot of work leading up. It was a lot of work afterwards. And I just said and I did it for years. And I just said one day, am I enjoying this? No. Am I going to do it anymore? No. And I told people, I felt sick in the stomach telling people, my family, I'm not hosting it anymore. I'm not doing it. And, you know, the parts of ourselves wants to go, well, gee, aren't you being selfish? It's only once a year. You know, your mind's going, don't be so selfish. God, you're not a very nice person. You're being selfish. Yes, I am. It's my life. Yeah. You know, so what's the alternative? You either piss yourself off, or you piss someone else off. I mean, Dr. John Demartini, he calls it the law of lesser pisses. You're far better off pissing other people off than pissing yourself off, because it's your life. It's not their life. They won't like you. They'll call you selfish. Well, it's my life, right? Why are we so conditioned? Why are we so afraid not to stand in our power and have that sovereignty? Yes, me not turning up may piss you off. It doesn't mean I love you any less. If you want to interpret it that way and be all this victim, well, so be it. But law of lesser pisses, right? And you're better off pissing someone else off than yourself.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to look up his book. The other thing about the selfish is that it is institutionalized in our minds from a very young age, that if we don't conform to someone else's thoughts, you know, what they perceive should happen in that environment, then we're being selfish. But why are we being selfish? We're not. We're being true to self, and that's being self-full. And we should be teaching our kids to be self-full, not arrogant and not at the detriment of others, but self-full, to allow yourself to feel full and to live a full life. Because this compliance and this obligation expectations is a lot, I think, of what gives us that inner dialogue of, well, should I, shouldn't I? Yeah, I know I'm not happy. I don't want to do it, but then am I being selfish? All that monologue that goes on inside our mind. So living a self-full life and making choices that fill up you and fill up your cup, I think is, for me, that's something that I have started doing, and it's so rewarding. And yes, I still feel guilty and shameful and fearful when I say no to things that I really don't want to go to. But then once I've made the decision and I've committed to it and I've said no, I feel so much better. And most of the time, they don't care if you're there or not. Right?
They'll get over it.
They do get over it. And it doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means I don't want to go to that event. Right?
Helen, how selfish of you.
Oh, I know.
You're not a very nice person. Oh, goodness me.
Yeah. So that can cause a lot of stress.
Yeah.
That is one area that can cause a lot of stress. And other areas where we get stressed is also that self-dialogue of projecting expectations on, if I do that, this will happen. What are some tips for dealing with stress?
Yeah, look, it's like I always say, the answer always lies within. And what I mean by that, there's just on a very basic level, understand that words are spells. Now, I'm not saying you delve into witchcraft or anything like that, but
they're powerful.
The words that we say in here reverberate out into our world. The words that we say here reverberate out into our world. So, the power is within. Start with, what words are you saying to yourself? Oh, I'm always late. Oh, I'm clumsy, or whatever, even just little things like that. What are you? Because the thing is that in every second of every day, we are the creators of our world.
Yeah.
And so I would challenge, anyone listening, the words you use, what are you spelling into the world, into your world? By the words you think, the words you say, what is going out into the energetic field there that you are creating? So that's the first thing, right? You cannot be free and free emotionally if you are putting yourself down. Words are spells. It's a really powerful thing to remember, and take an inventory of the words that you're saying to yourself. Yeah, because it can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And it's funny because once I started noticing the words that I said, because I had a coach help me with this years and years ago, it's amazing when you stop, focus, and listen to the words you think and the words you say, there's patterns in there.
Yes.
And you will pick up on those patterns. And so simple little things about, I mustn't forget. I'm not going to say never, but I very rarely use that anymore, because if I say I mustn't forget, my mind's going to focus on forget, right? So now I say I must remember. I must remember to take that with me, rather than I mustn't forget to pick that up or whatever. I must remember. And small little changes like that for me have made a massive difference.
Yeah. I would add to that things like words like could, should, I must, I have to, all of those things are very energetically, very heavy, obligatory kind of words. So look for where you're saying, oh, look, I've got to go and do this now, or I should really do that. Should you? Or are you just choosing to? Or is it coming from a place of guilt or fear?
Or expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So those words, I think that's a really good tip for dealing with stress, is focus on your words and what you're saying to yourself, and then notice the patterns.
Yes.
Because I say a lot on my podcast, and just if you know me as a person, with awareness comes choice. If you're not aware of these things, you can't do anything about it. But if you focus on your patterns or the words you're saying, and then you want to make a change, you can, because you're now aware of it. And then you have choice.
That's a really good point. I actually think there are three things for any sort of change. Right? You touched on the first one, awareness. You can't change something unless you're aware of it. So like us having conversations like this is a good way of raising awareness. And the second thing is, to in the moment. So you're aware of something in the moment, to pause and accept or acknowledge that that's happened. Oh, there I go again with my obligation or my negative self-talk. So that's the second thing, is accepting in the moment that you've said that, or acknowledging that you've said that. And I think the third thing is then going manual, right? A lot of our lives is so emotionally, we're on autopilot, right? And we just do things out of habit because we're busy and and all of a sudden you get to the end of the day, the end of the week, and it's like, oh, we live so unconsciously. And so, once we are aware of something, two, we've stopped and acknowledged that, yes, we are behaving that way, we are saying those things. The third thing is to go manual. Think of an automatic car, right? You put it in drive and you just drive. Whereas if you go manual, you have to actually pause and change gears. And it's in that pausing and changing gears that actually we can change. But it starts, like you said, at awareness. Got to be awareness of our words to ourselves, for example, in the moment. Oh, there I go again with my could, should, must language. The manual part, how can I replace that? I want to do that. I choose now to go and do X. Is a very different energy, frequency, vibration, whatever word you want to use it. So those three things, awareness, acceptance or acknowledgement, and then go manual on something is really, really important. Okay.
I'm going to say awareness, in the moment, and manual, because that spells aim.
Yes, nice.
And that's a good way for our listeners to remember, be aware, and then in the moment, catch what you're saying in the moment, and then go manual, put it into, put yourself in gear.
Yeah.
Rather than just on automatic on drive. I speak a lot about an acronym OCCE, not quite as good as AIM, but nearly. And I say observe your thoughts, observe them, then catch them and hold on to them. And are they working for me? Are they not working for me? If they're not, change them. So observe, catch, change, and then E for engage, like just engage differently. Even just the slightest little bit, you will engage differently once you observe and catch, because you are now aware. So you observe, you catch, you change, and then you engage differently to affect a different outcome. But AIM is much simpler, like, awareness, in the moment, so pause, and then go manual. AIM. Yeah, that's really good.
Just workshopping on the go here, right?
Workshopping, that's how my mind works. So. So keep going.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say one other thing is just pause and just be, just you and your thoughts. No phone, no social media, no TV, no computer. When was the last time, for instance, you just went and spent, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes in nature, just sitting there, just being with your thoughts, your feelings, like instead of this rushing existence that we have where we've got to be here, we've got to do that. When was the last time you honestly just sat with yourself and got to know yourself and your thoughts and your feelings? For a lot of people, that's hardly ever. We get to the end of the day, have a few drinks or whatever it might be, then collapse into bed, then get up the next day and do it all again.
Yeah. And that's one thing for me that I do. I meditate every day now. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long. But if I go for a walk on the beach, because I live near the beach, at the end of my walk, I'll just sit on the beach with no music, nothing. I'll just sit and observe the waves and the wind and the birds, and if there's people on the beach, what are they doing? And that is so, I can't even describe the words that I get from doing that, because then I can come back and I can get into work and I can be focused.
Yeah.
Because I've cleared out the cobwebs, like I've swept the mind, and so now I've got a clean house so that I can come back and work for it. But if you had have asked me to do that 10 years ago, I would have said, don't be stupid, I don't have time, I'm too busy. Can't you see how important I am and how busy I am? But taking the time to slow down helps you become not fast, but be able to do more.
And look at your words there, Helen. I haven't got time, I'm too busy. What spell are you putting out into the universe?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. That's what I used to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
who hasn't said I'm too busy, haven't got time?
Yeah.
I've said that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, but we sit down in front of the TV every night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's always time you can make time to do things that you value and feel are important, and our own self-care, self-compassion. So being so hard on ourselves and beating ourselves up and, so stupid, we shouldn't have done that, blah, blah, blah. It's now, if things don't go as I planned or as I thought they might, then I think, okay, well, what have I learned from that?
It's a really good point. And I'll share this with you. I don't know, let's go 6 weeks ago. It might have been earlier, it might have been sooner, it might have been later. I sent a an email to my list with a picture of a Tibushina jasmine bush that was in flower out in the back of our place. And the message of that email was that nature is imperfect and impermanent, and so are we. And the thing with that is, I took a close-up of about 4 different flowers. So if I took a far-away image and a close-up image from afar. It was just beautiful. The beautiful pinky purpley flowers. It was just nature at its finest kind of thing. And then I took photos of the flowers, and one of them had 4 petals, another one had 5 petals, one of them had 3 petals, one of them was curled up like it. Nature is imperfect. Oh. Here's the thing, right? Us human beings, we are part of nature. We can't get out of nature. We live in nature. We're captive of the seasons, as it were. And yet what we try and do is we try and control every darn thing in our lives. We try and make every darn thing perfect. And yet in doing that, we are going against nature, because nature is imperfect and impermanent. Nature has her seasons. Not everything is summer where everything is fun. Sometimes it's winter and cold and dark. Yeah. Nature has these rhythms and seasons, and nature is imperfect in those rhythms and seasons. And yet here we are, we fight this pointless battle, frustrating battle, stress-filled battle with ourselves to be perfect. And, I would challenge anyone listening to this, just do this for your own benefit. Go and have a look at a blossom in flower, a tree in flower, or a shrub in flower. Go and have a look at a tree and look at its gnarly bark and how straight and beautiful some branches are and how gnarled and awful some other branches are. And just observe, because when you see it with your own eyes, you kind of, actually, I get it.
Yeah.
There is a massive lesson from nature about the impermanence and imperfection out there.
Yeah. You spoke earlier about, sometimes you walk into a room and you can feel small and that you've experienced self-doubt. So, people could look at you and say, oh, you're so lucky and you've done this and you've done that and you've got a fantastic career. So you've experienced self-doubt in the past. How have you answered that little voice inside your head that might say, well, who am I to do this? Who am I to write a book? Who am I to be a coach or whatever, marketing writer and things like that? So how do you answer that voice in your head that might pop up, or does it still pop up? Or
well, the last time I experienced that little voice in my head was about 45 minutes ago, just before we got on the call. And it was saying those same things. Gee, you better be on point today. Gee, are you sure you're the right person for Helen and her group? Gee, you better make sure it's a really good job. Why aren't you doing something? Like, I had all of those things. Gee, what if it doesn't work out well? Gee, what if you look silly? What if you don't do a good job for these people? I had all of those things going on in my head. And every time I speak in front of people, every time I run a workshop, I have all of those things going on inside my head. And one of the things I take comfort from is, I'll go back to David Hawkins in his book, Letting Go, is that, everybody secretly harbors the fear that they are dumb, ugly, unlovable, and a failure. So if I can, I guess to answer it directly, how I overcome that is I just accept that's part of me.
Yeah.
And I also accept the fact that if I just turn up and be me, that is enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is so powerful, because I just think, well, I'm giving you me and my best, and that's enough. And if it's not the right thing for you, that's okay. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to be part of it. You can just ignore it and walk away. But if you resonate with it and you want to be part of the tribe and we can get together and lift each other up, then jump on board. So, but again, 10 years ago, I wasn't that person. 10 years ago, I wanted you to like me. I really wanted you to like me.
Agreed. And for me, 10 years ago, I would have had 300 pages of notes, and I would have had slides to show you, and everything would have been structured and blah, 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 blah. It would have all been this wonderful presentation of, well, oh, gee, that was so polished and nice. But it also would have been inauthentic in some ways.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if we've got time, Helen, I'll just give you this one more example. Yeah. One of the things that I do is, with my poetry, I go to local poetry slams. And so, you get up in front of 50, 100 people and read out your poetry. Now, I've spoken at stages all around the country. I've spoken to big groups of people. I was a teacher for 20 years. So standing up and talking in front of people is not difficult for me per se, you know, and hopefully this has been useful for people, and I've been articulate and all those sorts of things. But one of the things that I found, and because this gets back to when did I feel self-doubt? So the very first time, about 6 months ago now, I did my first live poetry performance. There was about 120 people in the room, and I got, I've got this, I've done this speaking before. I got up there, and it was kind of embarrassing because I realized my legs were actually shaking. I had to really concentrate to hold my paper still. And I'm going, look, what the hell's going on here? And anyway, I got through the poem and everyone clapped, and I sat down, and I was really thrown by that experience. And I'm driving home, and I kind of, the conclusion I came to was that because it was like my whole body was kind of shaking, that I managed to just hold it together long enough. It was weird. I'm in my mid 50s, and I'm coming apart on stage where I never have in the past. And I think what the thing was, I realized that a lot of my speaking and so forth, and my workshops have all been, like I said, very structured and ordered, and they've all come from my mind to get people from one point to another. When I was sharing poetry, which comes from the heart, my goodness, that was an incredibly vulnerable place to be. And it dug up more stuff from my shadow, where I still needed to be liked, obviously, even though I've done all the work, I still needed to be liked. I didn't want to be embarrassed. All of that stuff is really, really deep. And part of my stuff too is I have to be a high achiever, right? I got recognition and love by being a high achiever. And if I don't get, not a high achiever, don't get the award, then I'm not loved. My self-worth was very tied to my achievement. And so going to this, and I've done it 4 or 5 times since then, I've made myself go and do this, get up, and I don't shake as much as I did the first time, but putting myself in a vulnerable position, which was a relatively safe space, because it was a very encouraging environment. But yeah, I still get things like that come up, even though I've done all the work. I've been to South America, been to the Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. Because I'm a human being, I still have those things. And I just, at the end of the day, I just accepted, okay, yeah, I was really vulnerable then, and it was a really difficult thing. And I guess it got me thinking too more that, a lot of people say, well, I've gone and done the course, gone to the seminar, that should be fixed now. And my take on that is that, well, gee whiz, we shower every day, we cook every day in the kitchen. Why is my personal development any different? Why? We accept those things, right? But because I've gone to a seminar, I read a book, I shouldn't have to deal with that stuff anymore. And so that whole experience of being vulnerable in front of people, and me shaking almost uncontrollably, was a beautiful learning experience for me, because it realized that made me realize that I've still got a lot of work to do in my shadow, with that achievement being tied, or my self-worth rather, being tied to achievement. So I've been looking a lot of that since that episode. So yeah, I still get that little voice in my head.
And all of us have it. It might not be with attachment to achievement being equal to love, but we will all have deep inside of us, in our unconscious mind, the association that this means that for me. Yes. And it's come from a very early age, but we don't know, because it's unconscious and it's back there, but we know how we respond as an adult to a certain situation, but we're not really sure why we respond that way to that situation. So doing the work, and you showing yourself through your poetry, was you really giving a bit of yourself to everyone, which can be scary, because, it's not taking them on a journey from here to here in a normal training environment. It's sharing with the audience. But going back to that quote that I quoted at the beginning from your book, that if you want to find true freedom to find you, then you're invited to take a journey into your shadow self, that one of your readers wrote about your Finding You book. That in and of itself says a lot about what they experienced in reading the book. So what is it that you think causes your readers to evoke such a heartfelt response?
Yeah, It's a really interesting question, because I didn't, when I started, I've written poetry for many years. And when so the start of the book, it wasn't meant to be a book, right? For whatever reason, I just got messages to start writing poems, and I did that, and I very tentatively, I showed them to one or two people, and they went, "Oh, wow, that really kind of hit me here. Like, I really felt that. I felt that what you're saying there. I could really feel it." And, you know, when you show one or two people and you get that response, well, it can be a bit of a hit and miss. Yeah, okay, well, they're just being nice or whatever it might be. But the more people I showed things to, the more they went, "Wow, I really felt that. And you've got to publish this stuff." And I'm going, "I'm not doing that." Like, gosh, how embarrassing. No, I'm not doing that, you know. And people just, you know, like that, when people say things like, "That made me cry," you know, that's, well, okay, if that made you cry, maybe it and helps you look within, maybe that will help someone else. And I think it's getting back to that, being vulnerable. Like, it was the fact that it was, I guess, so raw, so heartfelt, as opposed to being intellectual, because I've got a fairly strong intellectual mind. And so me overcoming that and writing from the heart was, I guess, the difference. That's the only, I don't have an intellectual answer for that, other than that's what I think it is, because it's a different thing from that headspace. It was a heart space thing.
Yeah. Well, you've done some amazing work. I've read so many reviews about your book, Finding You, and I haven't read it yet, but I am going to purchase my copy so I can read it. So what's happening for you now?
Yep, that's it there. Yes.
What's next for you? Tell me about what you're focusing on.
So I'm focusing on accepting that I'm just like nature, that I am imperfect. And I must say that has been an incredibly liberating thing for me, because I don't beat myself up as much anymore. And so that, to me, that's a daily ongoing thing, of just, yep, I'm going to, you know. And so just a quick example, if this happened 10 years ago, I would have got off this call and gone, "Oh, I didn't mention that. I should have said that. Why did I say that?" You know, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, I now know that whatever I've said are the things that people who are listening needed to hear. So I don't beat myself up. So that's the thing about being imperfect. The other thing is that I'm continuing to look within. I continue to have my just be moments. I continue to work on my shadow, but I'm also, I've got another book in the pipeline. I'm not going to say what that is just yet. And
we can have you back on, isn't it?
Yes, I'd love to. Yeah. And I'm also creating some programs that we'll be launching soon. So, and again, I don't want to say too much about them right at this moment, because there's nothing in ready to be let go yet. So,
okay, yeah. That's fantastic. It's very exciting. I can't wait to see what programs you're releasing and the new book. So, to finish today with for our audience, in one sentence, what advice would you give to someone who is maybe feeling a little bit lost or overwhelmed, or just lacks confidence and wants to find it?
Know that you're not alone. You're not broken. You're just human. You know, that's
perfect.
Because here's the thing. This is 2 or 3 sentences, but here's the thing, right? When we are hurting, when in that moment we feel small or petty, or we feel like we're being selfish, we don't feel good about ourselves because those emotions are uncomfortable. When we feel that, it can feel very isolating. You know, and that mental loop can start and get worse, because emotions start the thought, right? Sorry, thoughts start the emotion, right? Oh, I'm terrible, and then I feel terrible. You know, so that to me is the big thing, is to know that you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You are human, and you are having a human experience, and you are unwinding in your imperfection, your human experience. So there was 35 sentences. Apologies there.
That's okay. That's fine. That was a really beautiful way to put it. And the other thing is, we're not alone, and we're not broken, and other people are going through it. And to actually talk to someone.
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes just speaking about how you're feeling is a weight off your shoulders.
It releases energy. You're 100% right. It releases energy.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say, sorry to talk over you, the other thing I would say is that, you know, bravo to you for looking within and acknowledging that and doing something about it, because most people out there have just got the mask in place and go through life on autopilot, right? Same thing this year as they did last year, the year before, So good on you for looking in. You know, more power to you. You know, wonderful. I acknowledge you for doing that.
Yeah, and they should be proud of themselves if they're able to acknowledge and see that they're caught in a loop, or that they're caught in these patterns of words, or that they're just in a moment that they just don't feel good. And that's okay. That's
well,
okay.
you're imperfect.
Just feel through it, because that storm will pass. So you might be in the middle of that storm, but storms don't stay forever. That storm will pass, the rain will ease, the sun will come out, and you will see a rainbow.
Yeah, when we're in the middle of the ayahuasca ceremonies in South America, they're really difficult, right? Because you're purging a lot, as in physically vomiting. And one of the mantras of that that experience is, doesn't matter how bad it gets, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
This too shall pass.
This too shall pass. I think that's a beautiful way to end today's podcast. I will put all of the links to Steve's socials in the show notes. But Steve, where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. If you go to stevevincentonline.com, or if you wanted to order a copy of that book, if you're in Australia, it's findingyoubook.com.au, and I'm happy to sign it for you and ship it off to you within a couple of days of the order happening. So yeah, that's how you can find it. Or Instagram is Steve Vincent __.
Okay. Lovely. And I'll put all those links in. And I will also just advise the listeners that if they go to your website, they can download a most beautiful, beautiful poem.
Yeah,
so it's in a poster format, and I strongly recommend that everyone pop across to your website and download that poem. I'm not going to say any more about it, but it's worth getting. It is definitely worth getting.
Thank you.
So we'll end there. Thank you very much, Steve, for being a guest on the podcast today. And I hope that we will have you back again when you've launched your programs and your new book.
Thanks, Helen. I'd love to come back.
Bye for now.